The reason why you're not feeling hungry on your eating days after a 36 or 42-hour fast is because your body's actually burning a lot of fat. Yes, you are a fat burning machine. It's doing exactly what you want it to do. Hi everyone, it's Megan Ramos here with another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. Today, I'm going to answer your questions. We're going to cover topics such as how you know when your current fasting protocol is no longer working for you. Do you need to extend things to 48 hours? Should you skip breakfast or should it be the most important meal of the day? Now let's dive on in. The first question comes from Ewelina. On eating days, I almost always feel very full. I try to make my meal portions smaller, but I still feel full. I don't seem to feel any hunger cues on my eating days nor fasting days. Have 20 years of dieting broken my body? My usual fasting protocol is 336s or lately 242s. This is a fantastic question, and my friend, and for all of you out there who I have no doubt are in the same boat as our good friend here, you are not broken from your history of dieting. The reason why you're not feeling hungry on your eating days after a 36 or 42-hour fast is because your body's actually burning a lot of fat. Yes, you are a fat burning machine. It's doing exactly what you want it to do. But because your body is burning so much fat and providing it with so much of the fuel that it needs, the hunger just isn't there. It's not there at all, and it can feel really difficult to try to push through and eat multiple meals on those eating days. This is when it's time to graduate into doing that 48-hour fast twice a week. You don't have to force yourself to eat that lunch. You don't have to try to get creative with jam-packing a lot of fat calories and protein into a small meal. Not unless you have certain nutrient deficiencies that you're tackling. So if you do have certain nutrient deficiencies that are becoming serious issues, then yes, you might need to eat a little bit more and fast a little bit less. But if that's not the issue, then extend those 242s that you're doing to 248s. So that would look like on Sundays, you have lunch, you have dinner, you begin your fast, and you fast until Tuesday dinner. Then you eat Wednesday lunch and dinner, you fast from Wednesday dinner until Friday dinner, and then you eat Saturday and Sunday. Again, on repeat. 248s. It's okay. If you've got the body fat to burn and you're burning it and you're not feeling hungry, then it's time to graduate to 248s. And again, if you're doing those 336s and you found those 3 meals to be too small, then you go to the 42s and try to do 2 meals. That's what you've done. Still can't get that meal in just quite right, then you go to 48s. The 48s are often really effective. They keep your metabolism running high. They'll keep you burning fat. They'll keep you working towards your goals. Where a lot of people struggle here is they end up falling into a 1 meal a day situation. They can't necessarily do the 42s because they're not necessarily hungry all the time. The diet then gets kind of messy on the eating days. They end up struggling a bit with the fasting. Then they end up going to 24s and just think, I'm going to do daily 24s and that will be so much better. It is not better, my friend. It is not better at all. It's better to go then to the 48s twice a week. The next question says, I read on some of the polycystic ovary syndrome or PCOS blogs that you shouldn't skip breakfast because it balances your blood sugar, but I find it harder to meet my fasting goals when I eat breakfast. Is this reference to early time restricted eating, or is it better to meet the daily fasting goal or longer fast, or to consume the meals earlier in the day? All right, my friend, there are only a couple of instances where I say we should really have breakfast in the morning. Number one, your morning cortisol levels are quite high. They're on the higher side of things. Sometimes just having a higher morning glucose will tip you off on this. You can do a saliva test, or you could do a urine test that measures your saliva or urine over the period of 24 hours so you can see your cortisol curve. If our cortisol levels are elevated started in the morning, then we do want to eat breakfast. We do want to eat a protein-rich breakfast, usually within that first 30 to 60 minutes of waking to blunt the cortisol levels. So we can have dysregulated cortisol levels for a whole variety of reasons. I'm experiencing it personally right now because my son is going through a lot of teething and he's up all night. I don't remember the last time I slept. I know it was sometime in 2024. I don't think I've slept yet in 2025. I'm sure I probably won't have slept by the time this episode comes out. So my circadian rhythm's all off, my cortisol's all off as a result of that. So we have these disturbances, we could have stress going on, or again, just sort of your regular circadian rhythm stuff being a bit off. PCOS individuals tend to struggle with sleep quite a bit because of their lower progesterone levels. So it's always good to know where that cortisol is. Our cortisol levels are going to be the highest they are throughout the day in the morning, but are they a healthy high or are they an abnormally healthy high? So this is where doing that 24-hour urine or saliva test can be really helpful. Morning cortisol blood tests are virtually useless. So you want to look at it over 24 hours with a saliva test or a urine test. The urine one is called the Dutch test by Precision Analytica. They also do a saliva. That one, I believe in most states you can order yourself. I'm not so sure about ordering saliva independently. Many labs do them, like Genova. Any healthcare naturopath or integrative functional doctor will be able to order those particular tests for you as well. And I do believe you can use FSA or HSA in the United States to purchase the Dutch test for Precision Analytica. That's the one I used recently to learn my cortisol was so high. So that's usually what we're looking to tackle. This can further be an issue in individuals who are struggling with HPA axis dysfunction or adrenal insufficiency. If someone's struggling with adrenal insufficiency, meaning they sort of have these chronically lower levels of cortisol, even if their level is still okay in the morning, but it's too low throughout the rest of the day. We do want to maintain some cortisol reserves. So if you have adrenal insufficiency, then we include breakfast in the morning. So those are two instances. The third one would be if you have reverse T3 hypothyroidism. That's also largely connected to cortisol patterns. But if you had reverse T3 hypothyroidism, then we would want you to make sure that you're having breakfast within that first hour of waking. So those are really the three big ones. If someone is actively trying to conceive during the second half of the cycle, I do like to introduce breakfast, especially that last week of the cycle. But outside of that and those scenarios there, then you don't necessarily need to skip breakfast. With the people who are saying this, the rule of thought is that if you eat, you'll lower your cortisol levels, which will then lower your glucose levels. But if you have PCOS and you have a lot of insulin resistance, we do want to treat that insulin resistance first and then work on optimizing the rest of the levels outside of that. And if there are things that are driving your elevated cortisol, taking some supportive herbs or supplements to help with that, as well as addressing lifestyle factors, can go a long way. So we would do that simultaneously with treating the insulin resistance. Once we start having regular cycles and the symptoms of PCOS are gone, we're getting normal blood work. Imaging looks well, like an abdominal ultrasound or CT scan. And then we would move into doing something a little bit more optimized, where we would include breakfast during certain parts of our cycle. The next question says, how do I not lose more weight with extended fasting for autophagy? I am 71 and I've lost 44 pounds over an 8-month period. 1 pound most weeks, never more. Congratulations. That's a really cool amount of weight loss over an 8-month period, my friend. And then goes in to say, I have loose skin on my arms, bellies, and legs. I'm looking older than I ever have. I will be doing 24-hour fasts to maintain my weight loss. We see skin start to tighten on fasts that are 36 hours or longer, but it sort of depends on how that weight was lost. Now, from Anne's question, it does sound like she lost that 44 pounds over 8 months doing fasting. So congratulations, Anne. When we do have loose skin, we would then start to cycle in some of these longer fasts, so 36 hours or longer, which is why Anne is asking and saying that she wants to do some extended fasts for autophagy, but not lose weight. So Anne, one of the things I would do first is go get a DEXA body composition scan or get one of those body composition scales at home. There's the Omron, there's the Renpro, there's an in-body one that you can buy for your home. I have the in-body and I have the Omron. A bunch of coaches on my team have the Renpro and really like it. They're all good. Let's see where your body composition is so we know just how much weight that there is to lose. And if their body composition ends up surprising you a little bit, then we might not necessarily have to worry so much about modifying things on our eating days. We can carry on with extended fasting and we can introduce some strength training to help you put on some lean and healthy mass. The weight on the scale just tells us the total number. We want to know what that total number means. How much fat mass, how much bone mass, how much muscle mass is there? Are there any areas for improvement in any of these categories? If there ends up being a surprising amount of fat mass, then we don't have to necessarily worry about losing that fat mass. We would focus on gaining some healthy weight by optimizing our bone mass density and our muscle mass. And the best way to do that is 2 birds with 1 stone is through strength training or body weight training. Now, if you are to do that body composition analysis and you don't have very much body fat at all, and you want to do some of these therapeutic fasts for autophagy, then what we would do is we would add in anywhere from 15 to 30 extra grams of protein on your eating days, as well as fat. Usually for most people, we start off with 15 grams of protein, 15 grams of dietary fat. We just kind of see how their weight loss efforts shift, and then we increase it upwards to about 30 grams. So adding in healthy building blocks. So when you're doing that strength training to help you put on healthy weight, that you do have the building blocks there that you need in order to do so once the muscle starts to repair. So we do add in that extra protein, we do add in that extra fat. The goal is to gain healthy weight. So that's the approach that we've taken when we've worked with professional athletes in the past who have very little body fat and are looking to do therapeutic fasting for various reasons. And our last question of the day comes from Sylvia in California. Sylvia says, I started doing 42-hour fasts, sometimes 3 a week, sometimes 2 to switch it up. I'm not losing weight or inches. What am I doing wrong? Well, I love here that Cynthia is checking both weight and inches because sometimes that scale can be deceiving. So it's really about how are your clothes fitting? How are those inches moving? If you're not losing inches, then there's a bit of plateau going. Now, it's best to do 3 therapeutic fasts a week. So on those weeks that you can only do 2 42s, I would still throw in at least a 24 to get 3 of them in a week. There are things that we do a quick scan on eating days and then fasting days before we dive into some more of the labs. The first thing we do is look at eating days. This is usually where we can make the most progress and get the weight coming off. So on our eating days, are we snacking and grazing or are we just having meals? A lot of people will do something like 16 or 18 hours of fasting on their eating days, and then they'll have the 6 to 8 hour eating window, which they eat often and frequently through this 6 to 8 hours. That's bad news. That's grazing. We don't want to graze. We don't want to snack, even if it's on healthy, low carb or ketogenic foods, even if it's just meat. We don't want to do it because even having our insulin levels go up a little bit, micro amounts, constantly, nonstop, that constant stimulus of insulin for hours causes insulin resistance. Everybody thinks they need to eat a loaf of bread or a bowl of pasta or something that's going to cause their blood sugar levels to skyrocket. That's not the case. Even producing a little bit of insulin consistently over hours can cause insulin resistance itself. It's not always about the volume of insulin of food that you eat causes you to produce. It is the frequency at which you eat throughout the day. So are there opportunities to tidy up the time restricted eating on those 16, 18 hour fast days? Are we having lunch? Are we having dinner? Are we not having anything in between? So that's number 1. Number 2, are we getting in enough protein? Now, protein needs are going to vary greatly depending on the individual and their activities, and for women too, where they are in their hormonal stages of their journey. But are we getting in enough protein? I'll tell you, when I usually ask people to keep a food diary and track their macros, it's because I want to see this. And more often than not, people are eating 1 meal's worth of protein over the span of 2 meals. So then we adjust the protein. Most of us want to be sort of targeting around 80 grams of protein a day on a 2-meal day when we're looking to lose weight. Of course, that changes as we approach maintenance. We might need upwards to about 100, sometimes 120 grams, but usually it's around 80 grams over a 2-meal day. So 40 and 40 grams. We don't want to eat much more than 40, 50 grams per meal, because the excess will get converted to glucose at that particular time and cause gluconeogenesis. But we do want to make sure that we are getting in adequate protein on our eating days. So making sure we're not snacking and grazing, making sure we're getting in adequate protein. A lot of people too, when they switch to a low carb or ketogenic diet, is they remove starches, they remove grains, and they're not quite sure what to fill them up on. So they end up filling up on cheese and nuts and seeds. Now, cheese and nuts and seeds are fine to have if they agree with your system, but you need to think about having them in garnish size amounts. You've got to think, about 1/3 of your plate, if you're an omnivore, which most people are omnivores, 1/3 of your plate needs to be animal protein, 2/3 of your plate need to be fibrous vegetables. And then you can use some cheese, you can use some nuts and seeds as garnishes on those things that are on the plate. So you think of them as like a seasoning ingredient. They're not a side dish on their own. Sometimes people do keep the volume of cheese and nuts down very much, but they don't fill up on anything else. And then they're kind of constantly looking to eat, never really feeling quite satiated. And that ends up throwing them off. So are there things that we can fix on the eating days? For carnivores, we usually like them to have a couple different sources of fat, a couple different sources of protein at a meal to make sure we're getting in adequate food. For plant-based individuals, we really hunker down, make sure there's adequate protein and fat at each particular meal, and that we're covering all of our amino acid bases with the plant-based individuals. So those are some of the alternate diets that we often work a lot with, and some of the hiccups and fixes for those. Now, on your fasting days, how much heavy cream are you having, if you're even having any? Are you measuring it? A lot of people think they can ballpark it just by pouring, and that never goes well. We had one share community recently that when they measured it, they were having almost a cup worth throughout the day in their tea. So, this is something that we want to scale back down. I know Jason and I for years have said 3 tablespoons. Honestly, it should be more like 3 teaspoons. So we really want to cut back on the amount of fat that we're having throughout the day. We need to take a look at the use of fasting training wheels. Are you using them because you can have them and you want them on your fasting days? Or are you using them because you need to use them? So we'd look to see what improvements that we can make, if we can adjust anything, scale it down, if we need something versus if we just want to have something, and trying to remove the wants as much as possible from our fasting days. If those things are not working, then we start to look at the labs. We start to look to see if there's any deficiencies that we need to tackle, if there are any additional hormonal imbalances that we need to tackle. A common period in a woman's life is during perimenopause, when sometimes we do need to be very mindful about nutrient stores, especially iron stores, and making sure that those are all up to level. And with women who are going through perimenopause, in general, we cap at about 36 hours just to make sure that they are getting in protein, because this particular demographic usually needs about 100 grams of protein, even if they have quite a bit of weight loss to lose. And we try to get about 35 grams per meal over the span of 3 meals to help balance hormones. We do eat breakfast in the morning a lot in perimenopause, just to sort of help support thyroid function, to support adrenal function, to get some of those hormones in balance. Perimenopause is one of the most disruptive times in a woman's life. So we do focus a lot on 36-hour fasts 3 times a week, so we can get in those 3 meals and spread that protein out over the course of the day. we go through those strategies. We take a look at the labs. We try to point you in direction too from the labs of what practitioners you might need to see, if any, or if there's anything nutritional wise that stands out to us that we can help you adjust. But taking a look at those particular things can often really help get the fat loss going. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the Fasting Method Podcast. We'll be back next week. Bye for now and happy fasting.